The Minnesota Vikings set their initial 53-man roster after making their final roster cuts down to 53 yesterday, but are they done? We'll talk about that and more right after this. Most of the decisions the Vikings made on the 53-man roster yesterday weren't huge surprises, though there was a couple things that really did shock me when they happened. I think the biggest one would probably have to be the cut of Armon Watts in order to trade for Ross Blacklock, I believe, Blacklock
Yeah.
from the Houston Texans. Interesting. A lot of people are feeling like it's a money saving move because we did save a little over $1 million with that transaction there. And obviously some of the other, we traded Jesse Davis to the Steelers as well as releasing Sean Mannion, which is over $1 million. So we say that we don't know if they're done yet because there's a feeling that they're clearing. I mean, and who knows? Maybe they're just clearing cap just so they have some wiggle room in the regular season for injuries and whatnot, because we all know they happen. But the more exciting thing to talk about here is maybe there's another move that's going to be made. Maybe a trade, maybe a free agent is still out there they're going to bring in. Maybe bring J.C. Tretter out of retirement. Who knows? There was a report yesterday that they're looking for center depth still, so maybe they'll sign a center or trade for a center. A lot of interesting stuff, but the initial 53, like I said, not a ton of surprises. But overall, I'm feeling pretty good about it. And we got to remember, this is only the initial 53-man roster. Things are going to change. What are your thoughts? Yeah. What were your thoughts on the initial cuts?
Yeah, I agree. Armon Watts was definitely like the biggest surprise at this point. I think going into the preseason and training camp, both Mond and Mannion getting cut would have been a big surprise. But I think at this point, nobody was surprised. Maybe someone, I think a lot of us probably thought one of them would maybe make the team or whatever, but both of them not making it isn't really that big a surprise. Yeah, and you're talking about like potential players. There's still Ndamukong Suh out there getting rid of Armon Watts. I was going to dive into this later, but I guess I can say it right now because we'll have to see who they decide to make that like starter next to Phillips and Tomlinson. Since Armon Watts was like, that's who we all thought was going to be that guy throughout all preseason and training camp. So who is it going to be now? I can't imagine Blacklock's going to come in and take that right away. He hasn't shown, as far as I know, he was a second-round pick. He didn't show a lot of production for Houston since being drafted. I think he has like 1.5 sacks or something like that in his career there. Nothing crazy. So I don't know if they plan on having him go in. I heard some people saying they could see James Lynch being there, who I think has always been kind of like a sneaky, quiet guy that, no one talks about too much, but he's always been there. And I know out of college, he had like 10 sacks at least or something in his senior year. So that's interesting by itself. Other players that I already mentioned, Ndamukong Suh potentially there. So that's another player that we could go and pay for. Other guys that we might even dive in more is, there's the rumors with Jalen Rieger, which it would just be hilarious because of the whole Justin Jefferson, Jalen Rieger thing. I don't know how Rieger would feel about it because I know he got it's not his fault or Justin Jefferson's fault, but he's had probably some hard times about him getting picked before Justin Jefferson. But it would be like a big dick move if we did that with the Eagles. I don't know why they'd even think about doing that, but so that's a potential guy. If we were going to make a trade, though, I was a bigger Denzel Mims fan. So if I was going to trade for one of them, I would rather trade for him, even though I don't really feel like, depending on what the trade would be, because we don't need to trade much for a fifth receiver or whatever. Other than that, we really like Tyler Johnson. He got cut, Minnesota Gopher boy. I think out of any of those players, it would be awesome to bring him in. And I think he would be definitely good as a wide receiver 5. We haven't seen a lot of him. I think last year, how many years has he been in the league so far? 2? Is it 2 now? Or 3?
I think he was drafted in 2020.
2020. So we haven't seen him a lot of them. Yeah, so we haven't seen a lot of him last year, but his rookie season, he definitely was showing some potential. And Viking fans, including myself, I really wanted him that year. And once we saw him showing potential, and then even him in Winfield, it was kind of like, dang it, I knew we should have picked him. The funny thing about that, though, is we actually picked KJ Osborne and passed him up and got KJ Osborne. So I probably would have been wrong about that anyways, but now we could possibly get both of them.
Yeah, that'd be really interesting moves there. We could either get both of them, or we could get both of the receivers that were available around Justin Jefferson's pick. So that would be a very intriguing option there. And then obviously we'll kind of talk about receivers a little more when we get into the depth chart here. Speaking of which, should we jump into that depth chart, take a look at it?
Yeah, let's just go down the depth chart and see who kind of go through each position and see what our thoughts are and the players. Before we do that, though, I want to thank everybody for watching the GG Sports podcast of the Minnesota Vikings. Hit that subscribe button, hit that bell, get notifications for more of my videos. We're going to keep these coming going into the regular season. And yeah, let's jump right in here.
All right, sounds good. So let's start at the top with the quarterbacks. No surprises again with Mannion and Mond both cut. Who knows if one or both make the practice squad? We'll see in due time. That comes out today, which I did want to mention beforehand. Jamie is obviously in Spain, so we won't be able to be on top of the content, unfortunately. He's vacationing, enjoying life. So,
but I'll be back Thursday. I was just going to say I'll be back next Thursday, right before the NFL kicks off, and we'll be going hard and grinding and ready to go by right on Thursday, but for the beginning of our season here. So
So for the rest of the moves that happen here, as well as when the initial practice squad is announced today at 3:00, keep an eye on the Twitter. I'll be keeping updated there, keeping everybody posted on what's going on, as I'm sure a lot of other people will as well. But make sure to keep an eye on the Twitter. Anyway, let's get back to the roster here. So Kirk Cousins, Nick Mullins, zero surprises there. After the trade for Mullins, everyone knew he was going to stay. I think the only reason they kept Mannion and Mond was so they had quarterbacks to go in the last preseason game. That's all it was. So at the end of the day, this is no surprise. We kind of saw it coming. Running back wise, now it's weird the fact that they kept. Not weird they kept four, but it's surprising. You don't see a lot of teams keep four running backs, kind of five. We'll get into that in a second here. Obviously, no surprises. Delvin Cook, Alexander Madison, though. I wonder if he'll still be traded. There was rumors about I think was it Chris Thomason said 12 teams had called and asked about it.
Oh, so I didn't actually see that. Wow.
I think it would have to be because they're probably not going to get more than a fifth or a sixth. But also, if you keep him this year and let him walk and he signs as a starter somewhere else, you might get a third-round compensatory pick in the following draft. We'll see what happens there. But also, if they want to get rid of that roster spot. And here's the thing. It almost sounds like everyone's quitting on Alexander Madison, saying we don't need him, trade him. It's not that he's bad. It's that he's probably too good to be a number two in a four running back where there's four running backs on the team. Alexander Madison's a starting running back on any other team in the NFL.
Right. And we have that potential Ty Chandler and Alexander Madison's contracts up by the end of the year.
But Madison's a different running back. He can catch, but he's just big. And that's why it's nice. It'd be nice to keep him just because if Delvin goes down, we'll have be back to three running backs. And he's a big, thick boy. So he can, he'd be good to keep. But I understand if they decide to trade him for his sake and the Vikings' sake. I can see it working out. We'll see.
Before moving on to these other running backs, who do you think if Madison was to get traded, what teams do you think could use a guy like him the most? Because I've been trying to think of that. Because
Philadelphia. Miles Sanders isn't that good.
Yeah, Miles Sanders isn't that good, and I could agree with that. I think Seahawks potentially. We don't know how Rashad Penny is for sure going to do well, and then I know they got Walker, but there's no bona fide guy there.
Right.
What other teams though? Houston, I guess. Yeah, Houston probably still. I'm just trying to think of how many teams need running backs. But obviously, if we got 12 calls.
Anybody that picked up Alexander Madison in the 15th round of their fantasy draft, he gets traded. That's huge. You got yourself a starting back late.
Speaking of that, I got Delvin Cook and I handcuffed Alexander Madison. And if he gets traded and ends up being a starter for another team, I'm set. That's super. Yeah. That's a championship waiting to happen.
There you go. Let's move on to the most exciting news of the initial 53-man roster. Duluth, Minnesota's own CJ Ham makes the team. Some people are questioning if he'd make it or not. He made it. There was no question. He's a running back, fullback, tight end hybrid. There's no doubt he was going to make the roster. Kevin O'Connell,
tight end hybrid.
Way to use him. We're going to be okay there. CJ Ham, thank you for staying on the team. Great to see.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no bias. I said it. I had to say it almost every video leading up to this, but CJ Ham wasn't going anywhere. He's not going anywhere. Ending his career in Minnesota, hopefully.
For sure. All right, moving on to receiver. So here's where, because we're looking at the receiver depth on this team throughout camp and throughout preseason. Everyone's like, we could keep 7 receivers. We're deep at receiver. Excuse me. So obviously JJ, Thielen, KJ, Amir Smith-Marset, and Jalen Naylor all made the roster. Everyone was sitting there thinking so what are we going to do here? Obviously, the injury to BC Johnson complicated it a little bit more. But everyone was thinking everyone was thinking we could keep 7 receivers with JJ Thielen, Osborne, Amir Smith-Marset, BC, and then Tristan Jackson, and then maybe you'd have a fight between Jalen Naylor and Myron Mitchell for that 7th spot, or you keep 6. We only have 5, which makes me think that's going to be another move we're going to make at the receiver position. Maybe bring in somebody, which we already talked about some names. I think a name you didn't bring up that I had heard some talkings about. Who knows if, I mean, it could just all be, there's a lot of, BS that's still going around, but OBJ, maybe. He knows the offense that Kevin O'Connell's going to run from being with the Rams. So that's an option as well. Obviously, the ACL injury makes it complicated.
Right.
But it's just weird to me that everyone's thinking about how deep our receiver room is. We could keep 6, maybe 7, and we only have 5.
Yeah.
Which makes me think that there's another move coming at that spot. If there's not, I understand having 5 receivers. Maybe you go for another tight end. Who knows? But interesting thoughts there, though. We'll see what happens with that, if anything.
Yeah, I don't think OBJ, I don't think that's happening. I mean, we're still too deep with our first 3 receivers to bring a guy like OBJ, I think, in, because he's not going to come in and try to be a wide receiver 4. I don't see that happening, and spending the money he's going to ask for that. But yeah, like I said, I really hope Tyler Johnson. That'd be awesome. Just do it for us, for Minnesota people. But this wasn't too surprising. It was surprising that we only kept 5. I'm not surprised at all that Jalen Naylor is the one that ends up making this team over everyone else, since he's the rookie with tons of potential. And I'm not surprised about that. But I was definitely surprised that we didn't keep a 6th one. But what do you do when you keep 4 running backs?
Yeah, that's true. But I think if BC would have been healthy, I think they would have kept BC and made it 6. I'm kind of surprised Tristan Jackson wasn't added in his spot right now, but
right.
We'll see. Hopefully he still can make it to the practice squad. So jumping up over to tight ends. Now the tight end position is very shallow. Irv Smith, obviously, that's the thing. This tight end position wouldn't look so bad if Irv Smith had a better history of staying on the field. The fact that he doesn't makes Johnny Munt and Ben Ellison, who's more of a blocking tight end anyway. Minnesota boy, of course, though, so we got to love him. It makes it seem a little bit shaky, but I have faith that Irv Smith is going to stay healthy this year, and fingers crossed. Let's hope so. But that'll be an interesting position to see
we'll see.
There.
I mean,
and maybe they can bring somebody else in.
Right. I was going to say, I still wouldn't be surprised if we did something like that. Especially, the fact that we haven't done anything like that yet, is positive news as far as Irv Smith's injury and everything like that, and being ready for week 1. But yeah, behind him, it is getting kind of sketchy there.
Yeah. So we'll see what happens there. Moving on to the offensive line. Not a ton of surprises here. Christian Darrisaw. Your starters are going to be Christian Darrisaw, Ezra Cleveland, Garrett Bradbury. For now, as we hear, we're maybe looking for another center. Ed Ingram did secure that starting spot after the trade of Jesse Davis, which I guess that's kind of surprising that we traded Davis, but I get it. He wasn't very good. You get a pick for him, a conditional pick. Cool. Then Brian O'Neill, of course, with backup being Blake Brando is going to be your swing tackle. Vidarian Lowe, you're keeping him for keeping him for depth at tackle. Chris Reed basically is going to be what we thought Jesse Davis was going to be, like that swing interior offensive lineman backup. Austin Slotman's in the same role. And then, of course, Oli Udoh, he's a big boy. Probably a better tackle than he is a guard. You keep him around because he has some starting experience. If you need him, he can at least step in and spot start. So I think the depth at the offensive line is actually really, really solid. And I like it a lot with Chris Reed and Austin Slotman. Those two can play any position on the interior. So that's huge.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, I agree. I think I just agree.
Yeah, this is the best the offensive line has looked for the Vikings in a long, long time. So can't be upset about that.
Still, just the center thing. Hopefully Bradbury steps up, or we figure out the center thing. That's still the weakest link on there that we hope changes up. But it's exciting. Ingram starting, exciting.
Yeah. All right, defensive line. Let's start here with the defensive interior. The entire defensive line, basically, in a 3-4 is different. But Delvin Thompson, Harrison Phillips, Jonathan Bullard, Ross Blacklock, James Lynch, and Minnesota Gopher Zone, Asezi Adameo. I'm happy with that one. He actually showed out quite a bit. I mean, he didn't make any huge splashes, but he was consistent in the preseason. So I think this interior offensive line is good, but it would have been nice to have kept Armon Watts. But I don't know. It's got to be a money move, which makes me think something else is coming. But
yeah.
But I do like this. I think they could use one more big guy in the middle to back up Delvin Tomlinson or to play next to him. We'll see if they do anything, but as of right now, I like the starters. Harrison Phillips, I think, is going to be a huge addition to this team. Delvin Tomlinson, if he can stay on the field, he's solid. Behind him, though, there's some question marks. And James Lynch, I know he's solid too, but there's still some questions there. So we'll see what happens with that. If they make any other additions, for now, we'll just kind of leave it there and see what happens.
Yeah.
Moving on to your linebackers. Now, I assume they're going to include all linebackers here. Okay, we'll start with the outside linebackers. Obviously, your starters, Danielle Hunter, Zadarius Smith, and the backups, DJ Wanham, Pat Jones, a second, and Luigi Villain, which he was the beneficiary of 2 turnovers, picked them both up. He played really well. Pat Jones, obviously the lone standing 3rd-round pick in the 2021 NFL draft, Rick Spielman's last draft. Kind of disappointing there, but we'll skip over that. DJ Wanham is another primary backup. This position's really, as long if Danielle Hunter and Zadarius Smith miss a combined 5 to 6 games this season, I think we're going to be okay in that position. Pat Jones showed me a lot. DJ Wanham, questions are still there. A lot of people question whether his sacks were kind of, not like legit, because I know, like we talked about, he had a couple against the Bears last year where Justin Fields basically just gave himself up to be sacked by him. So we'll see what happens. 6 of his sacks, I believe, came in the 2 games against the Bears. So we'll see if he can keep developing. But with Danielle Hunter and Zadarius Smith, if they can stay healthy, they said in those joint practices with the 49ers, they were basically unstoppable. So I'm pumped.
Yeah, dude, that's looking great. That's looking good. I'm excited. I think Danielle Hunter's gonna have a monster season
for sure,
and I think he's gonna be the most important player on our defense.
Yeah, I would agree. All right, inside linebackers. This is a position I also really like. Eric Kendricks, Jordan Hicks, Brian Asamoah, Troy Dye. Obviously, Kendricks and Hicks are going to be your main starters. I think Asamoah is going to get a lot of time. And Troy Dye has shown us some things in the past.
Mr. Mankato, by the way.
Yeah, right. But I love me some Brian Asamoah, of course. So I'm pretty pumped about this. I think the inside linebackers are good. Maybe there's a little bit question depth-wise with that 4th one. It was down between Troy Dye and Blake Lynch. Obviously, Dye made it. We'll see. We'll see maybe if they add another one, maybe drop one of the guys or drop Dye and make a signing. Who knows? But so far, I kind of like this interior. I kind of like these inside linebackers. I really like them. Of course, Eric Kendricks is going to be huge. Jordan Hicks, underrated signing, and Brian Asamoah is going to be solid. So not much to complain about here. I like it.
Yeah, I agree on that.
Also here, Troy Dye, 326 special team snaps last year. So he's a solid special teamer, which might be a reason why they kept him as well. All right, defensive backs. Let's start here. Patrick Peterson. Oh, they just grouped them all together. Cool. Patrick Peterson, Harrison Smith, Cam Dantzler, Cam Bynum, Shondon Sullivan, Andrew Booth Jr., Chris Boyd, Lewis Cena, Caleb Evans, and Josh Metellus. I like that a lot. I think Patrick Peterson is going to have a solid season. Cam Dantzler, Andrew Booth, we'll see what happens with them. I think they're going to be sharing a lot of time. Kind of surprised Chris Boyd made the roster. And then Caleb Evans is obviously showed some flashes. I think he's going to be more of a developmental guy there. And then safeties, of course, I think we're loaded, absolutely loaded at safety. Harrison Smith, Cam Bynum, Lewis Cine, and then Josh Metellus played pretty well, played pretty aggressively and pretty well in the preseason. So I'm happy with the defensive back.
Yeah, he was a guy that was probably on the roster bubble going into the season and everything, and he's the one that stepped up in the preseason and ends up making this 53-man roster. So he played well.
Pretty happy about that. Moving on to the specialists, long snapper Andrew DePaula, kicker Greg Joseph, and punter linebacker-sized Ryan Wright, which Ryan Wright boomed kick in Denver.
Dude,
the holds were no problem. Greg
amazing
Joseph nailed the 58-yarder with him holding. That was all just Vikings fans making something out of nothing, as we normally do. And yeah, I'm happy about this. Greg Joseph, I think he's gonna have a very, very good season. I'm pumped. So
yeah.
Any other thoughts on this roster before we get into some of what they could do coming up?
Only thing I guess is I still want to know who's the punt returner.
Yeah,
that's what's just in my mind. So we'll see. I think it's going to be ISM is my guess, but
yeah, I believe ISM as well. Yeah, I guess we'll find out in due time. Maybe they end up putting Ty Chandler back there. Who knows? But yeah, I mean, as I kind of mentioned before, I don't think they're done yet. I think there's moves to be made still. I think it is going to be either a receiver or a defensive interior lineman. Those are the two positions I'd be looking at, saying like maybe both. Who knows? But I definitely think that those two are where you're going to see where you're going to see some movement. Oh, offensive lineman as well. I mean, since they're talking about center, I could see center happening. I could see an Alexander Madison trade definitely being a huge part of that. I think they might explore, like, they're not actively shopping him, but if someone offers up a 5th round pick and you want to get and maybe you can bring in another player, you might do it.
And 12 teams called, so I mean, who knows? One of those guys are going to offer something that might be kind of hard to refuse, especially when you have Ty Chandler, who obviously looked fantastic in preseason. And as a Viking fan, I am excited just to see. I want to see him continue playing, see how he plays, against elite talent, other starters, and see if it carries over. But this year we'll probably not see a lot of that, especially if Madison's here. But yeah, I don't know if last year of his contract, Madison can go, like you said, Madison can go somewhere else, be a starter, hopefully even get himself a bigger contract than what he can here, and then we have an opportunity to kind of see Ty Chandler and as being probably the most impressive running back I've seen we seem like every preseason we seem to have a running back or a couple running backs that impress. I don't know what it is. It's like every year, but he seems a step up from all of them.
Yeah.
I think I don't know something about his. What were you going to say?
The only issue with the trade, though, is, as I kind of mentioned before, Delvin Cook, Kene, and Ty Chandler, they're not the same running back, as Delvin Cook is obviously, when healthy, an elite running back. Yeah. Those two are, they're younger, so we'll see what they can do. But Alexander Madison is just that size change, Size-wise, the other three are comparable. Madison is just like that bruiser running up the gut, and he's going to tire some people out, So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what they do if they want to. If they don't have an offer they're wowed by, I think they just keep Madison and roll with 4 running backs. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. So I don't know.
Yeah.
But
Agreed.
Anyway, that'll do it for our 53-man roster breakdown. As I said, keep an eye on our Twitter. I'll be going over some of the moves that are made throughout the coming days here as we get to the practice squad as well as the final 53. Let us know your thoughts down in the comment section, and we'll see you guys next time.
Skol Vikes.